Daniel, my beloved husband, passed away suddenly. My world shattered in an instant. His parents, instead of offering comfort, bombarded me with questions. "You'll return to your family now, right?" my mother-in-law asked, her lips curling into a strange smile. I hesitated, knowing her true intentions. They never truly accepted me, only tolerating my presence because of Daniel. I took a deep breath and replied firmly, "This house is no longer mine." Her expression froze. That was the first moment she realized her carefully laid plans were falling apart. But I knew this battle was far from over. I met Daniel through work. He was the brother of my colleague, often stopping by our office. At first, I saw him only as a friendly face, but over time his kindness drew me in. His brother set up a dinner between us, pretending he had to cancel last minute. That night, Daniel and I talked for hours, and by the end of the meal, I knew my life had changed forever. We fell in love quickly, and before long, we were married. Everything seemed perfect, but in reality, shadows had already begun creeping into our happiness. When I met Daniel's parents, they treated me warmly. They laughed, asked about my life, and made me feel welcome. I was relieved. "We only wish for your happiness," they assured us. But looking back, I realized their smiles never quite reached their eyes. They were studying me, calculating. Daniel and I had plans to build our own home, but I had also inherited a beautiful house from my grandfather. His parents seemed especially interested in this detail. I thought nothing of it at the time, but that house became the reason for everything that followed. Shortly after our wedding, Daniel received a sudden job transfer. It was an opportunity he couldn't refuse. "I'll come home on holidays," he promised. "My parents will visit you, so you won't be lonely." I smiled, trusting his words. But once he left, his mother's visits became frequent, too frequent. At first, she was kind, inviting me out to shop or dine. But slowly, I realized something was off. She always chose expensive places and conveniently forgot her wallet. When the bills came, I paid. I thought it was harmless at first. I was so very wrong. As months passed, my mother-in-law's requests became demands. If I refused to go out, she would guilt-trip me. "Don't you enjoy my company?" she would ask with a sad expression. I felt trapped. And then, one day she made an even bolder request: money. "Just a little," she said casually. "I made a reservation at a fine restaurant, and I need you to cover the extra cost." I hesitated, but she stared at me expectantly. My hands trembled as I opened my wallet. I told myself it was just this once. But deep down, I knew that was a lie. The more money I gave, the more she demanded. Then she and my father-in-law started visiting together. I found myself paying for their outings, their shopping, even their personal expenses. I considered telling Daniel, but every time I saw his tired face on video calls, I bit my tongue. "I'm fine," I told him, forcing a smile. One night, after another forced outing, I sat alone in my house, staring at the walls. A horrible thought crept into my mind. What if they were using me? What if from the beginning I had been nothing more than a pawn? I needed help. I finally confided in Daniel's younger brother. He listened, his expression darkening. "They've always been like this," he admitted. "You were never their priority. Your house was." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "They've lived lavishly for years, always looking for ways to gain wealth. When you married Daniel, they saw an opportunity. That house, they've wanted it for a long time." A chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, all the moments of false kindness, all the interest in my home, they made sense. My house wasn't just a home, it was a prize. That night, I made a decision. I would sell the house. I had to act fast before they could manipulate me any further. Daniel and I had already discussed moving once he returned. This was our best chance. With his brother's help, I found a buyer quickly. The papers were signed, and the deal was done. I felt a strange sense of relief. But my relief didn't last long. Daniel's sudden death changed everything. As I grieved, I knew I couldn't mourn in peace. Because his parents weren't finished with me yet. Daniel's funeral was a blur of sorrow. I barely had time to process his loss before his parents arrived, acting strangely. "You'll return to your family now," his mother said, smiling that twisted smile. And then I saw it, a moving truck parked outside. They weren't here to comfort me. They were here to take my home. My body went cold. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice steady, "the house has already been sold." Her eyes widened. For the first time, she was speechless. I had ruined their plan, but I knew they wouldn't give up so easily. Another truck pulled up, a moving company for the new owners. The workers stepped out, confused by the presence of Daniel's parents' furniture. "We need to move our things in," the new owner said, approaching. My mother-in-law's face turned pale. "This is impossible," she whispered. "This house belongs to us." Her voice rose to a desperate shriek. But it was too late. The documents were signed. The house was no longer mine, or hers. As the reality sank in, her expression twisted from shock to fury. I braced myself. She wouldn't leave quietly. The new family demanded my in-laws remove their furniture. My mother-in-law refused, clutching the doorway. "This is our home," she screamed. The movers hesitated, unsure of what to do. "Call the police," the new owner said. My father-in-law's face turned red with anger. He grabbed my mother-in-law's arm, trying to drag her away, but she resisted, sobbing. "How could you do this to us?" she wailed. "We deserve this house." But no one was listening. The truth was clear. They had lost, and they had no one to blame but themselves. The police arrived quickly, and my in-laws had no choice but to leave. My mother-in-law, her face twisted with rage, pointed a trembling finger at me. "You think you've won?" she spat. "You'll regret this." But her threats held no power. The house, the one thing she had schemed for, was gone. The movers carried away their furniture as she screamed in protest. My father-in-law, ashamed, pulled her away, mumbling, "Enough. It's over." As they walked out, I exhaled deeply. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding, but for the first time in months, I felt free. My in-laws didn't disappear quietly. My mother-in-law couldn't accept her loss. Days later, I heard she had returned to the house at night, hoping to reclaim what was hers. But the new owners were prepared. Security cameras caught her breaking windows, tearing at the walls in fury. She was arrested the next day. My father-in-law, embarrassed and exhausted, filed for divorce. He had supported her for years, but now, with nothing left, he walked away. I should have felt satisfied. But as I watched them fall apart, I felt only a quiet sadness. Greed had destroyed them. With the house sold, I moved away, choosing a small but peaceful home. It was strange at first, quiet, unfamiliar. But in time, I began to breathe again. Daniel's younger brother stayed in touch, checking on me often. "You're family to me," he said, his voice sincere. His words meant more than he knew. Though I had lost so much, I realized I hadn't lost everything. The shadows of my past no longer controlled me. I wasn't afraid anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I looked forward to the future, rather than fearing what came next. I built a life of my own, piece by piece. The memories of Daniel still lingered, but they no longer brought only pain. They carried warmth, too. I started new hobbies, made new friends, and allowed myself to smile again. There were difficult days, of course. Grief never truly fades, only softens. But I held on to the love we shared rather than the loss. My in-laws never reached out again. They had vanished into their own turmoil, no longer my burden. My life was finally mine again. And with each passing day, I felt lighter, freer, happier. On quiet nights, I sit by my window and look up at the stars. I imagine Daniel up there, watching over me, his warm smile never fading. I did it, I whisper. I'm free. The wind carries my words into the night, as if delivering them straight to him. And in my heart, I know he hears me. I close my eyes, breathing in the peace that has finally found me. My past is behind me, my future ahead. And as the stars twinkle above, I know. I am exactly where I'm meant to be.